done.
Thank you.
Thanks
Well,
so
well
much.
done you.
I thought I'd ask them a couple of questions first and then open it up to, and forgive me if I tell Jonathan he's talking too much. But first of all, I should ask you how you are after that.
Exhausted but elated. I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be amused, which is camp, but it's but it's also, it is great, you know, sharing it with friends, with people. It's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Did you learn anything new about him tonight, Mike?
Oh, a lot, yeah.
Shit.
Well, you gave a lot away.
Yeah. No, I didn't. He did.
I think it's easier to be open about some of your secrets when someone else is telling them for you. So,
I think that's true. I think that is true.
and credit to Joe actually, because he doesn't stop me digging in the dirt, or so to speak, or anywhere actually.
Dear diary.
This is to Mike first, but
Yeah.
but I think you both may. What do you think is the biggest legacy of lesbians and gay support in minors?
Well, the easy answer is solidarity. Yeah. Because it's an excellent example of that. And you forget that the solidarity in the first instance wasn't between the LGBT community and minors. It's the first instance of solidarity is with each other.
Yeah.
They were the dreadful days 40 years ago. The media, it's just, I've read Paul Parker's 2 volumes recently, and I'd forgotten quite how outrageous the media treated us, and the lies and the hysteria and everything else. And the only thing that got us through that is clinging on to each other. To an extent that actually we became completely impregnable, that you know, they could lie about us as much as they wanted. We didn't give a fucking damn, because they were the ones telling the lies, and we had that strength with each other. Which is why we could go into that mining community expecting homophobia. Why wouldn't we? We weren't stupid.
Yeah.
You know, miners don't tend to read gay news and get involved in kind of feminist politics, blah, blah, blah. The bizarre thing was we didn't experience any. I think because they vetted themselves beforehand, and the handful of people who had any kind of objection to our presence were people who's just, you know, they had religious reasons for feeling comfortable. And in fact, on that very first night that Jonathan mentions, by the end of the night, we're all pissed and we're just swapping sex stories between each other. And the Welsh couples are going, "What's a cock ring? What's poppers?" And you can see them looking at each other thinking, "Try that." Sorry, I've meandered.
No. I mean, I was really struck by the solidarity in a time of lies. I mean, if that's not something to remember, I don't know what is.
But I think, for me, what I think is really extraordinary is the fact that it was through the Welsh miners putting pressure on the National Union of Miners to use their block vote, and the National Union of Miners also asked other unions to do. But basically, it is through trades unions that lesbian and gay men got civil partnerships. And that is rarely talked about. And I think it is something which is so important, because it is about communities and you know, unions are communities, and it's communities coming together. And when communities come together, they become powerful. And to me, that I just think is so amazing. chokes me up, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I made such a big thing of it. And I mean, obviously there must have been other things around, but I think also we probably forget how homophobic the Labour Party was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many people know about the Peter Tatchell story in Bermondsey, and they just hung him out to dry when the Liberals went for him. When actually the gay Simon, what's his name?
Hughes.
You know, I was kissed by Peter, and all of the horrific homophobia, but he was left out to dry by the Labour Party, and you know has been thankfully ploughing a very deep and effective furrow of his own ever since. But you know that was 83, wasn't it? So that was only 2 years before.
And prior to that, you know, the Labour Party and the trade union movement was infested with racism, sexism, homophobia. You know, we had to fight that, and we've thankfully come a long way from then. And it's great, you know, we've got LGBT activists in the trade union movement, and that's strengthening the entire movement. You know, when we were banging on that door, we were saying, "Let us in. We belong with you. We are you. Let us in. Let us in." And now that they've opened the door, they've realised they're a lot stronger because of that.
So for the younger generation, what message would either of you have from your experience? What would be sort of the almost the things I wish I knew sort of message to people?
Oh God, that's a difficult one.
All it takes to start a movement is two people. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. You can't do it on your own.
No.
But all you need, and when you think about it, probably every political movement in history has come about as a result of two people starting a conversation, and then the ripples just flow from there. So, you know, that's it. If you want to start a movement, talk to somebody.
And just be brave, you know. If you feel like sort of you want to do something, just do it, you know. Find someone else, because it's, you know, as Mike says, it only takes two, well, or three or four or five, but anyway, you know, but yeah, I mean, just go with it.
And you make mistakes. Jonathan said this story before. So I too lived in Mayo Road, and there was a big gay community down there, very political. And it was a typical two-storey terraced house. And it had been decided that having a crap was perfectly natural, and it was bourgeois to be embarrassed about it. So off came the toilet door. I got it, I got the theory of it, but my sphincter wasn't having it. I've been constipated for 12 months. Yeah. Stupid, ridiculous concept, yeah, which thankfully the door was put back on the toilet. There's a reason shit stinks, you know what I mean? But that's just a good example of, you know, you think if it's a new movement, you're bound to make mistakes and get things wrong. But don't let that hold you back. You know, you're not going to be perfect, and these things are always a work in progress, because humanity isn't perfect and politics isn't perfect. We're always having to revise where we've been, where we are, and where we're going.
Neil Bartlett's been helping with this book, and he was saying that he said, you know, most people are going to think this book is about a long-term survivor of HIV. It's not about that at all. It's about love. It's about two men who loved each other for 38 years. So fuck off. That's what it's about. And on that basis, could each of you share a memory of Nigel, please? Whether it's from the LGSM days or say something. Because as we know, the book is about him and you.
Yeah, no. I mean, God, I mean, he was just an extraordinary sort of character. And oh God, I mean, God, the gift of the gab, and he loved to talk, and he loved to cook, and he loved to sort of, you know, cook and talk, and sort of, you know, and so it would be about midnight that you'd actually get food, but you'd had a fabulous time. And yeah, you know, I mean, he was just, I don't know. I mean, I'm biased because he gave me a life. You know, meeting him, I don't know what my life would have been, but meeting him completely changed everything. And I got to meet people like Mike, and yeah.
Many qualities, but one of them was his loyalty. You know, Nigel, if you were a friend of Nigel's, my God, he'd fight for you and stick up for you and defend you. And he was only that big. You know, small and powerful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's nice.
So, anyone got any questions? Yeah.
Hello. I'm Richard Desmond. I was diagnosed with lesbians after all. The thing that probably saved my life was I refused to take AZT.
Yes.
I was chief lecturer in Savoy Theatre. I spent all my days going up and down stairs. AZT started damaging my legs, and I stopped. My leg partner continued and died. I just wondered what your experience at that time of AZT was. My feeling is that at the time we didn't know better and we didn't want to blame the doctors. But AZT probably killed more people than HIV at that time.
Oh, I think that's true, Richard. I think that's absolutely true.
Looking back, I can see how we tried to be kind and we didn't want to say the doctors got it wrong, but they did. And many of us died because of it.
But
The drug companies got it.
I mean, what was really interesting was that there was,
Drug companies relied on the doctors.
well, yeah,
The
but
doctor's mistake.
well, you know, the drug companies kind of were leading the doctors by the nose half the time, because there was so much, you know, unknowns. People didn't know what was happening. And I remember being asked to be part of, it was a trial called the Concord trial. And basically they said, we have this cohort, which is going to be this group of you, and we will cut it in half, and one half will get the pill and the other half will get the placebo. And I said, oh, but don't you pair us up? Because it seemed to me that someone who has got the same kind of build or metabolism as me, and someone who doesn't, we're going to be a mismatch. And they went, oh no, that's far too complicated. And I just saw red. And I got a bit belligerent. I said, well now, you put a plank down half of me, and one half gets the pill and the other half gets the placebo, and I think that's a trial, but if you can't be bothered to do that, I can't be bothered to do AZT. And I never touched the stuff. And I think that was the reason that I survived basically up until 1996. I mean, in 1989, my CD4 count fell to 200, and that was an AIDS diagnosis, and I freaked. And because I had refused to be part of the Concord trial, I never saw the same people at Mortimer Market, which is where we'd been moved to from the Middlesex. And I fled to Chelsea and Westminster. And Chelsea and Westminster, I remember there were wonderful social workers who filled out my DS 1500, which told me I'd only got another 3 months to live. But when I got to see the doctor, which was a young Mark Nelson, and he was offering me these pills, and I just went, and most people would have just grabbed and said yes. And I went, can I think about it? And I remember flying to a place called the Landmark, which was an HIV drop-in centre. And I said, I don't know, I need to find a new HIV consultant. And I said, oh, I've got a great one at King's College Hospital. King's College Hospital is down the road and round the corner from where I live. I was going halfway across London to get to the Cobler. So I made an appointment to see this man, Chris Taylor. And basically I've been with him ever since. He started me on Septrin, which was great in terms of dealing with PCP, which was one of the major killers. And I kept getting shingles. And once you've had chickenpox, you can get shingles, same virus. So he put me on acyclovir prophylactically. And basically, that's what I was on from 1990 to 1996.
So, I mean,
But I think you're right. It did kill more people.
I'd like to say something about this because it's something I feel extremely strong about. I mean, what Jonathan is saying is that he turned it down in 1987, he turned it down in 1990, and we can almost be absolutely certain that if he hadn't turned it down on both occasions, he'd be dead. The Jarman book has got a poem entitled Derek Jarman Died of AZT, and I am absolutely certain that that is true. I'll give you two facts, right? Whether we have a debate about whether we're going to blame doctors or we're going to blame drug companies or what have you, but the trial was stopped on the basis of morality, that the drug was so effective that it would be wrong to carry out. This was a drug trial funded by Wellcome, by the drug company itself, and they abandoned the trial way before it finished because they said the results were so marvellous, because initially they were, that it would be irresponsible and immoral for them to continue the trial and deprive the people on placebo the drug. The drug was then approved and continued, and it took another 8 years of research to discover that after about 2 months, the virus replicated in a way that meant that AZT was no longer killing the virus, it was just wiping out your immune system, and it was killing people. Now the other thing that I'll tell you is that I happen to be doing pharmaceutical market research as a student job, and I was involved in this study with HIV consultants during 1988. This was like 3 lots of 3-hour interviews, 3 months apart. And the first one, it was fascinating to start off with. First of all, it was how do you treat people living with HIV and what's the approach. And then the next one, 3 months later, was focused specifically on AZT. So then I guess to who was funding the research. And to my absolute horror, I wish I'd kept the papers. The whole of the 3rd interviews with HIV consultants was this. What do I need to tell you about AZT so that you'll give more of it sooner? And every single fucking question I asked for those 3 hours was to find a way of what the drug company could make up about that drug. It was nothing to do with what its attributes were. What do I need to tell you about this drug so you'll increase the dose and you'll start giving it to people as soon as they're diagnosed? And that is the research that, to my shame, I carried out. So that is the game that the drug companies were playing. And I don't know how many people know that, but it's true, because I was the one asking the effing questions.
Can I jump in? I was on the Delta trial, which was the one after. Back in the 90s, I was a HIV specialist nurse at Chelsea and Westminster. There was the 2 wards. Thomas McCauley, TMAC, was the kind of the more, I'm going to say it deliberately, infamous HIV unit, and Elizabeth Gaskell, which was pretty much HIV, but it was promoted as infectious diseases for those that didn't want their HIV status shared. So thirdly, happily being an HIV specialist nurse, positive at 93. I was asked to go on the Delta trial around 94, 95 and 96, and it was looking at the efficacy of the combination of AZT. You definitely got AZT in the trial. You may have got DDI, you may have got EDC. So I was on, I was taking the tablets as were given to me in the trial, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker and neutropenic, and I developed, within a couple of months I developed 3 lots of AIDS to find illnesses, including internal chaos as well. 2 years into the trial, they took, again, it was one of those moral things. We know what the results are already. 2 years into the trial, they took blindness off, and I discovered that I was on AZT, placebo. So I got quite ill in that
Wow.
2 years. But again, the drug trials were also important as well, because for every failure in drug, the failures were as important because that told you what didn't work. And yes, indeed, some of the drug companies were very greedy, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is after 6 months you were worse off with AZT than you were on placebo, but they stopped the trial before they discovered it. And it took another 6 years for those facts to be true. That is fact. Anyway, any other questions? Because we could talk about that all night.
Oh no, we can't.
Oh yes, we can. Anything else? Any other?
Is there, so obviously a lot of us were here because we've seen the film, is there a story that wasn't shown in the film from that time that you think either should have been told or understand why it hasn't been told but would like to share here?
Well, what there is there is this wonderful film which was made by a number of members of Lesbian and Gay Men Support the Miners, called All Out Dancing in July's. And it's basically a 27-minute documentary. And Stephen Beresford, who in 1993, when John Major was closing the remainder of the pits that Thatcher hadn't closed, he was at the Royal College of Dramatic Art. And he was saying to his partner at the time, why aren't people out on the street demonstrating? They should be demonstrating. This is outrageous. And his partner told him about Lesbian and Gay Men Support the Miners, and he was not having it. It couldn't be possible. A group of gay men going down to South Wales to support. No, that can't be true. And he wasn't having it, and he stormed out, and that was that. But when computers became more kind of, well, you could use them, you know, they arrived, which was like 2000. So, you know, mobile phones and computers are new to us lot. But he thought, could this be true? So he tapped in Lesbian and Gay Men Support the Miners, and up came this 27-minute documentary.
If you haven't seen it,
it's well worth a view.
It mentions the word communist, by the way.
And that's the thing, because Mark was a communist. And one of the reasons, is it not, that the communists had already got connections with Dulais. And that is why we as a group went there. So there was already groundwork. And that isn't in the film because, of course, the film would never been shown in America.
But dancing, yeah, All Out Dancing in July, you see all the real versions of these guys, and it's delightful. Look it up, it's on YouTube and on...
And you'll see Nigel.
Yeah.
Because he was the compere in the electric ballroom.
Yeah. So I know there was quite a few things that didn't happen that are in Pride, but the question was, are there some things that did happen that Pride didn't mention?
Well, the most significant one Jonathan mentioned already, and that was the reception that we got when we went in. The movie, it shows a hostile reception, and that's a large part of the movie. We don't have a problem with that. It's a movie, it's not a documentary.
Yeah.
You've got to keep your audience in a sense of jeopardy all the time, so that's why that was. But the irony is, I think if Stephen had tried to portray what happened on our first visit truthfully, nobody fucking believed it. And I think that was true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we scarcely believed it. So I mean, if we scarcely believed it was happening, fair enough. You know.
Well, and the truth of the matter was that on the very first time that we went there, we got lost. So we never arrived until something like 2 o'clock in the morning. So everybody, and there were about 30 of us, we all slept on Di Donovan's floors. I mean, because we missed the first going to. So it wasn't until the next day that we gingerly went in, and we were shit scared, weren't we? I mean, we didn't know what to expect, and it was really nerve-wracking. And we went in, and there was this awful hush, and then somebody started clapping, and the whole room erupted, and that was it.
And of course, Nigel and were amalgamated, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nigel was amalgamated with Gethin, because there was a real Gethin Roberts.
And I think it's important to mention as well, I mean, the role of the women, because I think basically when we first made contact with that community, it was the women who rounded on the men and said, "What are you laughing about, boys?" And they were coming out with all kinds of silly banter and so forth. And the women said, "We will treat these people just like all our other supporters, and we'll be polite to them, and if there's things you want to know, bloody well ask them." Yeah. And I think that the effect of that was that by the time we actually paid the visit down there, the men in particular had discussed it all, so they kind of come to terms with it. And as I said earlier, when it actually came down to it that night, after several pints of log or whatever, they just wanted to talk about sex and our lives and fashion and stuff like that. So, there was never a problem with it.
But what was interesting, because Sian told me that basically they'd had this discussion and they had decided that they would accept our money, and if anybody didn't agree, they would know when we were coming down and they should make themselves scarce.
Yeah.
So they made themselves scarce. So, we were welcomed, but, I'm sure underneath, and Stephen gets it in the film,
Tell us about
and Cliff really was a real character.
Yeah. Tell us the insurance story.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to tell?
Yeah, go on.
So there we are. We're going round with our minibus, picking LGSM people up from the various hosts that have put them up. And we pulled up outside Cliff's house, and there's a car parked outside it. And Sean's on our minibus, and we're waiting for the people to come out to join us to go on this rally. And Sean just looked at the car and just kind of said to no one in particular, she just said, "I don't know about Di Dividend and Cliff, but Di doesn't have seem to sell him a lot of insurance." And we just howled with laughter because we all knew, within minutes, people would go, "Oh, there's the gay one. You're staying with the gay one." And Cliff was quite open with us. Now, people have asked, was he out? Well, he wasn't out in the sense we were. We were all like me. We'd fled our hometowns and moved to London where it was a lot safer. He'd stayed in his own community, but by God, he'd had plenty of sex down those mines.
Yeah.
And what's more, if he was that closeted, the prospect of 27 mad queens descending on his community, he'd have fled for the hills, and he didn't. He did the absolute opposite. He was noticeable for his kind of welcoming to us. So he wasn't officially out, but you couldn't get more out than what Cliff was.
And there is a wonderful photograph taken by a woman called Imogen Young, and it's like the first time that we're down there, and there are all of LGSM up dancing, but there is Cliff dancing and loving it. But apart from Cliff and members of LGSM, it's just the women who are dancing. None of the men were dancing. I mean, it's such a beautiful image, such a beautiful image. And that was it was me clapping my hands with glee, and it was that photograph that gave Dominic his 4.5 minute shame, shame, shame dance.
And there was no tweet from Bromley, I'm afraid. Anything else?
Can I just tell one
Yeah.
quick
Sure.
story? You asking stuff that's not been revealed so far. There's one comic incident when we were collecting outside Gazewell bookshop, and the state had uncovered an 1870 something law about begging, and they were accusing people who were collecting for the miners on the streets of begging. Completely spurious, but it was just harassment. And so there we were with our buckets at Gazewell, and this young copper turned round the corner, and I just said, "Oh, here we go." And he came up to us and said, "I could arrest you for that, you know." And I said, "No, you couldn't." And he looked at me. He said, "Yep, you're collecting on the public highway." I said, "But you see, we're not. We're stood on the pavement lights of Gazewell bookshop here. We're actually on private property." He was quite young, quite cute actually. And he just said, "Aha, but you're collecting off members of the public who are stood on the highway." I said, "True." I said, "If we imagine a perpendicular line coming in here, and I held my hand here, and at that point,
Like VAR.
he just smirked and walked away.
The man who invented VAR.
VAR, you
Yeah.
lost me.
Football offside rule.
Oh, absolutely right.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Was Nigel in the final scenes of the film? You know, I think you were in the final scenes marching across the bridge.
No. Nigel had a major heart attack, so he was in hospital. So we couldn't be part of that. So, but he did get the most amazing. I mean, this hugest of get well soon cards from every member of the cast and the crew. I mean, it was beautiful. It was really heartwarming.
Anything else before we break up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's common question. Hi, I'm Nicholas. It's first of all, it's really wonderful hearing all of this. I think it's been quite. My brain has been going on at 1,000 miles per hour, I think. But I think one thing that kept coming back to me is related to a question that you asked around advice for younger people. It's how, because you've walked in this path for a long time. I have a sense sometimes that there are no communities. I mean, we're losing a lot of that community and solidarity with each other. What do you make of sort of how the world has sort of changed and where we are now in terms of communities and that sense of solidarity? I mean, it's not like are we doomed or not, right? It's like, what is your perception of that? How do you feel about it? Is there anything that you can share with us around that?
Well, I do think it's been a deliberate, it's part of the culture war to try and destroy that sense of community. I mean, Margaret Thatcher famously said there is no such thing as community or society.
Yeah.
There are only individuals and families. And that's quite chilling, really. This is a woman who was, by the way, a personal friend and admirer of General Pinochet of Chile, who was a murderous dictator. So there's a deliberate attempt to destroy sense of community, but you can't. It's innate to human nature. And so it's a bit like squeezing jelly, really. You know, they'll try their best to destroy the sense of community, but we'll always reformulate it. But the stronger we are as a community, and by we, that could mean anybody, anything. The stronger we are as a community, then the stronger we are in terms of getting the rights that we demand and so forth. So it's not a direct answer to your question. I do regret the lack of LGBT spaces since pubs and clubs have closed down, because Grindr, I'm afraid, isn't a community. You know, it's atomising people.
Yeah.
Now, the pubs have gone, and there's not a lot we can do about that. And in some ways there's something positive about that, because perhaps there's less need in big cities for specific LGBT places, because it's a lot easier to be out and so forth. But I still think we need something. I mean, look, we're here. We're being a community. You're it now. This is a community.
I think that's that's what is important, you know, because fascism is on the rise. I mean, just say it as it is, you know, that ginger man in the States is a fascist, you know, and he's leading that march. And the idea that he can even, you know, be meeting with Putin, you know, another fascist, basically, I mean, and not be dealing with, you know, the people, you know, who are being battered, is just unbelievable. But it's happening, and I think that one just has to find your friends and, you know, keep together.
Yeah.
I think one thing to be really crystal clear on is that what's happening to the trans community now is so close to a mirror image of the way that gay men and lesbians were epitomised in the 70s and 80s. It's frightening. And it's frightening because it is being done on purpose. So that for me is very worrying, is the way in which we've got that whole, all of the tropes, all of the dreadful, horrible things that are said about trans people today are the same things that were said about gay men, and particularly gay men, but gay men and lesbians back in the 70s and 80s. And it's to be aware that this is done on purpose. The right is trying to get us to fight each other.
Yeah.
It is the way it works.
Yeah.
Please go home and watch Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, the murdering of Lumumba in the Congo, and you will get from that the CIA, British Civil Service, actually openly saying it was because they were scared shitless, and Nkrumah in Ghana, that all of these countries get an independence, that they would lose the power in the UN, and there would be a united Africa that would have control of its own resources. And there was no way that was going to fucking happen. And the head of the British MI6 sat there and she said, it's really quite easy, you know. All you do is get to fight each other. You just need a few bad words here and a few bad words there. And you just step back and let them destroy each other, and then we've won. She said, there's a few other things we do as well that sort of help it along. And they said, oh, what's that? So I can possibly tell you that. But the nub of it, and this was open, CIA, MI5, get the buggers to fight each other. So if there's one thing, don't allow us to fight each other. Because we need to be together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. This is an overwhelming turnout. Please do put some money in the Positive bag. Please do buy some more books. There's lots of queer history stories you won't know about on those tables. If you're interested, please do take a look. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you, of course, to this remarkable man. And of course, Mr. Mike Jackson as well.